The landlord who ignored my mother's maintenance requests for 15 years just sold me his entire portfolio. She lives there now. For free. Forever. Part 1. The Signing. The title company on Michigan Avenue smells like coffee and recycled air and the particular quiet of rooms where large decisions get made without ceremony. I've been in rooms like this before, 4 times, to be exact, each time for a property in Lansing or Grand Rapids, each time wearing the same navy suit I bought the year I hit my first 6 figures and decided that certain moments deserve to be met properly dressed. Today I'm wearing it again. It's not an expensive suit. It's clean and pressed and intentional, which is what I've always aimed for. Clean, pressed, intentional. Across the table from me is a man named Gerald Fitch, estate attorney, representing the interests of a Grosse Pointe LLC that has owned a 6-unit apartment building on Delray Street in southwest Detroit since 1987. Gerald is efficient and professional and entirely unaware of what this room means to me. He slides documents across a laminate table. He explains terms I already know. I nod at the right intervals. My broker, Darnell, sits to my left and says very little, because I've told him I don't need narration today. The purchase price is $187,000. I've run the cash flow numbers so many times they've become something like a prayer. 6 units, current rents averaging $780 per month gross, operating expenses at roughly 42%, net operating income approximately $54,000 annually after stabilization. Cap rate around 8.2% at purchase price. I could recite these numbers in my sleep. I have recited them in my sleep. My girlfriend of 3 years can confirm this, and she finds it either endearing or alarming depending on the month. I sign the papers. Each page. Initials where indicated, signature where required. Gerald produces 6 keys on a ring with a paper tag reading Delray St., all units. He sets them on the table between us like they're nothing. Like they're just keys. I pick them up. They're heavy in a way that has nothing to do with weight. One of them is the key to Unit 3B. I was 4 years old when my mother first turned a key like this in that lock. I was 19 the last time I turned it from the inside, leaving 1 bag, 1 broken zippered duffel, a full ride to Michigan State and a determination that felt like ambition from the outside and felt, from the inside, mostly like terror of becoming the thing I was leaving. That was 2002. 22 years ago. I stand in the parking lot of the title company on a Tuesday afternoon in October and I call my mother. She picks up on the second ring. She has always picked up on the second ring. This is one of the organizing facts of my life, along with the fact that she takes her coffee with 2 sugars and keeps a spare key under the second flower pot and always knows, somehow, when I'm about to say something that matters. I say, "Mom, I bought the building." She is quiet for 3 seconds. She says, "Which building?" I say, "Ours." What she says next, I'm not going to put in this story. Some things are between a son and his mother and don't need an audience. What I'll say is that I stood in that parking lot for a long time after she said it, and the October air in Detroit was cold the way Detroit October always is, and I was 39 years old in a navy suit holding 6 keys, and I was also, for a moment, 4 years old again on Delray Street, and those 2 things were not in contradiction. They were the same man. They'd always been. Part 2. Where I'm from, the true account. I want to be precise about Delray Street, because precision matters and because I'm tired of the way people mythologize Detroit poverty into something cinematic. Southwest Detroit was not the worst neighborhood in the city in the 1980s and 90s when I was growing up there. It was a working neighborhood, auto plant workers, hospital staff, service industry families, that had absorbed 30 years of industrial decline and disinvestment and was carrying that weight in the way working neighborhoods do, quietly, stubbornly, with a lot of deferred maintenance and not enough resources and people who nonetheless showed up and held things together because what else do you do? My mother, Claudette, was one of those people. She worked the cafeteria at Henry Ford Hospital for 21 years. She made $31,000 at her peak. I know this because I did her taxes every year from the time I was 15 and figured out that I was better at numbers than the $85 H&R Block appointment she'd been using. She raised me alone after my father left when I was 7. She paid $640 a month for Unit 3B in the Delray Street building, a 2-bedroom apartment with hardwood floors under the linoleum, original radiators that banged all winter, a kitchen window that admitted cold air from October through April through a gap in the frame that the landlord's office acknowledged and did not fix for the entirety of the 11 years we lived there after I first reported it at age 8, having decided to try handling the maintenance calls myself because I had noticed. My mother's voice got tired when she made them. The landlord was a man named Richard Calloway. He lived in Grosse Pointe. He visited the building twice a year, once in June, once in December, to collect checks and inspect the exterior and drink from a thermos of coffee in his car before driving back. He was not cruel, exactly. He was absent. There is a particular kind of damage that gets done by the consistently, comfortably absent, Not malice, just the steady pressure of not being seen as a priority. My mother's maintenance requests were not priorities. The radiator in the bedroom was not a priority. The hallway light on the second floor, which was out for 11 months in 1994, was not a priority. My mother was not a priority. I was, however, very good at math. Mr. Patterson, David Patterson, 8th grade pre-algebra and geometry at Southwestern Middle School, noticed this in the fall of 1989 when I finished a unit exam in 14 minutes and got every question right and then sat quietly doing nothing because I'd already read ahead 2 chapters and there was nothing else to do. He kept me after class. Not in the punitive sense, he just asked me questions. Good questions. The kind that assumed I was capable of answering them, which at that point was not a universal assumption made about 12-year-old boys from Southwest Detroit. He stayed after school with me twice a week for 2 years. He found scholarship programs I didn't know existed. He wrote recommendation letters. He made phone calls. I got a full ride to Michigan State University in 2002. Civil engineering. I left Delray Street on a Saturday in August with 1 bag, a duffel with a zipper that had been broken since sophomore year and which I had fixed 3 times with safety pins and which I never replaced because the money for a new bag always seemed necessary somewhere else. My mother drove me to East Lansing. She hugged me in the parking lot of my dormitory for what felt like a long time. She drove back to Delray Street alone. I told myself I wasn't coming back. Part 3. The 15 years, what it actually takes. I want to be clear that I am not a prodigy and I am not a natural entrepreneur and I was not born knowing how to build a real estate portfolio. I was born knowing how to do math and how to defer gratification and how to be afraid of ending up somewhere specific, which is a different set of skills that I had to slowly convert into something useful. I graduated Michigan State in 2006. Civil engineering degree, 3.8 GPA, 1 internship at a structural firm in Lansing, 1 job offer at $58,000 per year. I took it. I moved into a studio apartment that cost $620 per month and I lived as if I made $40,000. The difference went into savings. Every month. Automatically. I didn't discuss this with my coworkers because I'd noticed that discussing money with people who spend money differently than you creates friction that isn't useful. I read every real estate investing book that existed. I'm not exaggerating, I tracked them systematically. I listened to podcasts on my commute. I went to local real estate investor meetups in Lansing and sat in the back and asked questions afterward. Most people at those meetups were white and older than me, and some of them were helpful and some of them were not, and I didn't have time to sort them too carefully because I needed the information from all of them. At 29, I bought my first property, a single-family house in Lansing, $67,000, cash, no mortgage. I paid cash because I'd done the math on leverage against risk tolerance and decided that for a first property, with a full-time job and no experience, the clean certainty of cash was worth the slower accumulation. I was wrong about this in the purely financial sense. Leverage would have accelerated everything, but I was not wrong about what I needed psychologically, which was to own something fully and completely and know that no one could take it. I rented it for $875 per month. I managed it myself. I learned everything the hard way. Bad tenants, a couple who stopped paying in month 4 and left the bathroom in a condition I won't describe here. A furnace that died in February and cost $4,400 to replace, and which I paid out of my emergency reserve, which I had maintained for exactly this purpose. An eviction that took 4 months through Ingham County District Court and cost $3,200 in legal fees and lost rent. I sat through that eviction hearing in a conference room across from tenants who had good reasons for where they were even as they were costing me money I couldn't afford to lose. I learned to screen better. I learned to move faster on problems. I learned that property management is mostly human psychology dressed up in legal process. By 35, I owned 4 properties. By 38, I owned 9. The cash flow was real, $4,800 per month net at 9 properties, enough that I could see the shape of a life that wasn't dependent on a salary, though I kept the engineering job because I wasn't ready to let go of the safety net and because there was something in me that needed to keep earning it the way my mother had always earned it, directly, every day, clocking in. Then I started watching Detroit. Update 1. The spreadsheet called Delray. I had been checking Delray Street property ownership records every 3 months for 2 years before Gerald Fitch's office called Darnell's office. The file on my laptop was labeled simply Delray. It contained ownership history for every building within 2 blocks of my mother's address, going back to 1987. Market value assessments from the Wayne County Assessor, updated quarterly. Permit activity, when buildings got permits pulled, what for, what that indicated about owner investment. Rental market comps. And a separate tab labeled Gordy how that I'd started in 2018 when construction began on the International Bridge. The Gordie Howe International Bridge is real, and its impact on Southwest Detroit is real, and I want to be precise about this because it's not mythology, it's infrastructure economics. The Ambassador Bridge, which it would eventually parallel, handles approximately 25% of all U.S.-Canada trade by value. The new bridge was designed to double capacity at that crossing point. The construction corridor runs directly through Southwest Detroit. Property values in that corridor had been moving, quietly, steadily, not dramatically, but measurably, since 2019. I was watching the measurements. The Callaway estate reached out to Darnell in August of the year I turned 40. Richard Callaway was 81 and in assisted living in Bloomfield Hills, and his children were liquidating his Detroit portfolio, 7 properties across 4 neighborhoods, as part of estate planning. The Delray Street building was in the portfolio. So were 6 others. I told Darnell I wanted the Delray Street building first. Then I told him I wanted to look at whatever else the estate was selling in the Southwest Corridor. Before any showings, before any offers, I drove to Delray Street alone on a Wednesday morning and walked through the building. I didn't tell the current tenants who I was. I identified myself as a prospective buyer, which was true. I walked through each unit. I walked through 3B last. The radiator still banged. I stood in the bedroom and listened to it for a full minute. The kitchen window had been replaced at some point. New glass, new hardware, but whoever installed it hadn't leveled the frame, and it sat in the opening at a slight angle that you wouldn't notice unless you'd spent years noticing it. I noticed it immediately. I looked at it for a long time. I knew exactly what it would cost to fix it. I'd been a civil engineer for 15 years. I'd renovated 9 investment properties. I knew the scope, the labor, the materials, the timeline. I could fix that window in an afternoon. I made an offer on the Delray Street building that afternoon. Simultaneously, I identified 3 additional Callaway properties in the same corridor that fit my acquisition criteria. 2 4-unit buildings on adjacent blocks, 1 8-unit building 2 streets over. Combined asking $425,000. I negotiated. We landed at $612,000 for all 4 buildings, 22 units total, in a package deal that the estate attorneys preferred because it simplified their liquidation. I put 25% down on each, funded from equity lines against my existing Lansing and Grand Rapids portfolio. Took investment loans for the remainder. The math worked. The math had always worked. I'd run it enough times to know. Total acquisition, 4 buildings, 22 units, $612,000. On and around the block where I grew up. From the man who hadn't fixed the light in the hallway for 11 months. I called my mother from the title company parking lot on a Tuesday in October and told her I'd bought the building. Then I called her back 3 days later and told her the rest. Update 2. The conversation that took 11 minutes. She lives in Inkster, my mother, has lived there for 8 years, in a 1-bedroom apartment on Glenwood Street that costs $780 per month. After 21 years at Henry Ford, she retired at 65, which she did not want to do, but her knees made the decision for her, the way bodies eventually make decisions for people who have spent decades on hard floors. Her Social Security and small pension give her $1,940 a month. She lives carefully. She has always lived carefully. She has never been reckless with a dollar in her life, not because she didn't want to be, but because the margins never allowed it. She has never owned property. I told her I wanted her to move back to Delray Street, into Unit 3B. I told her I was going to renovate it, completely, the right way, not a coat of paint and a prayer, but fully every system, every surface, done correctly. I told her the rent was 0. Not reduced. Not subsidized. 0. Monthly. Forever. She told me she couldn't accept that. I told her she didn't have a choice. We went back and forth for 11 minutes. I know it's 11 minutes because I've retold this conversation enough times that I started timing subsequent retellings and they always land around 11 minutes, which tells me I've internalized the exact shape of it. She said it was too much. I said I'd run the numbers and I could carry it. She said it wasn't right to let me do that. I said I needed her to understand that this was not generosity, this was math and intention, and I'd been doing both for 15 years specifically for this purpose. She said she'd feel like a burden. I told her that the word burden had no application here, and if she used it again I was going to replace it with the phrase return on investment, because that's what she was. Every decision she'd made for the 30-plus years she'd raised me on Delray Street had been an investment in whatever I turned out to be, and this was the return. She was quiet for a moment. Then she said, "You're going to fix the radiator?" I said, "I'm going to replace the whole system." She said, "And the window?" I said, "The whole kitchen." She was quiet again. Then, "Okay." I hired a contractor named Veronica Moore, 44 years old, raised on Epworth Street 6 blocks from Del Rey, runs a crew of 8 that she assembled and trained over 12 years of doing residential renovation work in Detroit and its immediate suburbs. She came recommended by 2 other investors I respect, and when I met her she asked better questions about the project scope than most contractors I've worked with. I hired her. The renovation of Unit 3B took 11 weeks. Full HVAC replacement, forced air, no more radiators, warmth that comes out quietly without ceremony. $14,200. Kitchen completely rebuilt, new cabinets, countertops, appliances, window reinstalled in a properly leveled frame that opens and closes smoothly and seals correctly against October air. $11,800. Bathroom retiled, new fixtures throughout. $5,400. Original hardwood floors discovered under 3 layers of linoleum, refinished to something approaching their original state. $2,800. Electrical updated to current code. $7,100. Paint, doors, hardware. $3,900. Total for Unit 3B. $45,200. My mother moved in on a Saturday in February. I drove her. Carried her boxes. She doesn't have many. She has always lived with exactly what she needed and not much more. She walked through the unit slowly, the way people walk through spaces that carry memory. She touched the kitchen counter with one hand, flat-palmed, the way you touch something to confirm it's real. She turned the heat up and stood next to the vent and felt the warm air come out. No banging. No clanking. Just warmth. She went to the kitchen window. Opened it. Closed it. It moved smoothly, the way it should have always moved, the way it would have moved if anyone had installed it correctly the first time. She stood at that window for a long time and looked out at Del Rey Street, the same view from the same window where she'd looked out for 15 years while she was raising me, and she said, "It looks the same out there." I stood next to her. I said, "It won't for long." Update 3, the block changes. I renovated all 22 units over 18 months. Systematically, one by one, working with Veronica's crew in a sequence, I'd planned on a spreadsheet that accounted for tenant schedules and unit availability and the most efficient flow of materials and labor. For tenants who'd been in their units for 5 or more years, I offered full relocation assistance during renovation, a furnished short-term rental, movers, all covered, and then brought them back to updated units at rent increases that were real but modest. Below market. I know what it means to be displaced. I didn't do it. The Gordie Howe International Bridge opened in November of the following year, 6 months late, which anyone who has ever worked in infrastructure construction would have told you to expect. It opened anyway. The biggest international border crossing in North America, 2 miles from Del Rey Street. On the day it opened, the Detroit Free Press ran a piece about the impact on Southwest Detroit property values. I read it carefully and found it slightly behind where my spreadsheet already was. My 4 buildings, acquired for $612,000 combined, were appraised 14 months after purchase at $1,140,000. I had gained $528,000 in equity in 14 months on buildings where my mother lives for free. I want to say that number slowly because I want it to be understood correctly. Not as a boast, as a proof. As a demonstration that the 15 years of saving and studying and asking questions and making mistakes and getting back up and running the numbers again were not theory. They were preparation. 15 years of preparation for a specific opportunity in a specific place that I had been watching for a specific reason, and when the opportunity arrived, I was ready. The equity gain was not luck. The equity gain was the product of discipline and patience and a spreadsheet labeled Del Rey that I had maintained for 2 years before the first conversation with Gerald Fitch. My mother gets her hair done on Saturday mornings now. There's a salon on the block. Update 4. The 5th building and the salon. 8 months after the initial acquisition, my broker called about a 5th property, a mixed-use building on the same block. Ground floor commercial, vacant for 4 years. 2 apartments above, both occupied by long-term tenants. Listed at $210,000. The commercial space was approximately 1,400 square feet, last used as a hair salon, equipment long gone but the plumbing still roughed in. The previous tenant had closed during the pandemic and not returned. I bought it. The commercial renovation cost $34,000, new flooring, updated electrical for salon equipment, lighting, a bathroom for staff, a proper storefront window that actually presented the space correctly from the street. I'd been thinking about the tenant before I finished the renovation. There's a specific kind of prospective tenant I was looking for. Someone from the neighborhood, someone building something, someone who needed a manageable rent to make their business work. I mentioned this to Veronica, who mentioned it to someone in her network, who mentioned it to a woman named Destiny Crawford. Destiny was 31. She'd grown up 4 blocks from Del Rey Street. She'd been doing hair since she was 17, out of her aunt's house first, then a chair rental at a shop in Dearborn, then her own chair at a shop on the east side. She'd been saving for her own space for 3 years. She'd looked at spaces in the corridors where gentrification had raised rents to $2,800 and $3,200 per month, and she'd done the math, and the math didn't work for a new business trying to build a clientele. I leased to her at $800 per month. My broker told me I was leaving money on the table. The market rate for that space, given the bridge traffic and the corridor appreciation, was closer to $1,600. I heard him. I thought about what it meant to have someone leave money on a table for you, the specific dignity of being seen as worth the cost, the way it changes what's possible. I leased to Destiny at $800 per month on a 5-year term with renewal options. She opened in April. She named the shop Del Rey Thread. On the first Saturday, there was a line out the door by 8:30 in the morning. I know because I was sitting on the front steps of my mother's building drinking coffee and watching the block. My mother was Destiny's 3rd customer that morning. She came back to the building afterward and told me the girl did good work and the shop was clean and she'd made an appointment for the following week. She said it as if this were simply a reasonable update about a new neighborhood business. She did not say, "My son arranged for this to happen," or "My son is building this block back," or any of the things that would have made the moment about me. She just said the shop was clean and the girl did good work. That is my mother. That is exactly my mother. That is the specific woman who raised me on this block for 15 years and deserves a kitchen counter that nobody apologizes for. Update 5. Month 30. The numbers and the note card. It's a Saturday morning in June. 30 months since I signed the papers in Gerald Fitch's laminate-tabled conference room. I'm sitting on the front steps of 2114 Del Rey Street. My building, my mother's building, the building I grew up in, and my mother brings me coffee the way she has always brought coffee to people she loves. Quietly, without making a production of it, 2 sugars already in mind because she has always known exactly how I take it. We sit on the steps in the June morning and watch the block. Del Rey Thread is open. It opens at 8 on Saturdays. By 8:15 the chairs are full. Through the storefront window I can see Destiny moving between stations, talking to customers, laughing at something. The bridge is visible on clear days now, actually visible, its arc against the sky, and today is clear. The border crossing that's handling freight and passenger traffic 2 miles from where we're sitting, the crossing that moved these property values, the crossing that proved the investment thesis I've been building on a spreadsheet for 2 years. The financial picture, at month 30. 5 buildings, 24 units, 22 residential, 2 commercial. Total acquisition cost, $822,000. Total renovation investment, $380,000. Total invested, $1,202,000. Combined current appraised value, $1,580,000. Combined equity above total investment, $378,000. Monthly gross income, $16,200. Monthly net cash flow after all expenses, debt service, and reserves, $5,400. My mother's unit, $0 per month, carried entirely by the portfolio, an amount the cash flow absorbs without stress. My engineering salary, still coming in, largely going toward the next acquisition. My total net worth across all properties, Detroit and prior, approximately $2.4 million. These numbers are real. I want them to be real in this account, present and specific, because the mythology of wealth building often strips out the numbers, makes it about inspiration and grit, as if inspiration and grit aren't downstream of spreadsheets and compound interest and 15 years of buying things at the right price and maintaining them and not doing stupid things with the equity. The inspiration is real. The grit is real. The numbers are also real, and the numbers are what made the inspiration actionable. My mother is watching the block. After a while she says, "Mr. Patterson would be proud." I look at her. I haven't heard that name in years, haven't said it, haven't thought it consciously, though I suppose it's been somewhere in the architecture of everything that's followed from those twice-a-week sessions in his classroom in 1989. I say, "You remember Mr. Patterson?" She says, "I sent him a card when you got your engineering license." He wrote back. I didn't know this. I sit with it for a moment, the image of my mother, at her careful desk in Unit 3B, writing a card to my 8th grade math teacher to tell him what had become of me. She would have written it carefully, in her precise handwriting, and she would have mailed it without telling me because she doesn't perform her love, she just enacts it. I say, "What did he say?" She reaches into her sweater pocket. She brought the card. She knew I would ask. She has always known what I'm going to ask a moment before I ask it, which I used to find uncanny and now understand is just what it looks like when someone has been paying complete attention to you for 41 years. She hands me a folded note card. I open it. Mr. Patterson's handwriting, I recognize it immediately, the particular forward lean of it, the way he always crossed his T's with a slight upstroke, says, "I always knew he'd build something." I just didn't know it would be this. I refold the note card carefully. Put it in my jacket pocket. Drink my coffee. I look at the block for a long time. Resolution: what I know now. I left Delray Street at 19 with one bag and a broken zipper and a terror I had the discipline to convert into a plan. I came back at 41 with a down payment and a spreadsheet and a navy suit that is clean and pressed and intentional, and I bought the building. The landlord who lived in Grosse Pointe and visited twice a year and did not fix the hallway light for 11 months. His estate sold me that building for $187,000. The first thing I did after taking possession, before any renovation work began, before Veronica Moore's crew pulled a single permit, was replace the hallway light on the second floor. I drove to the building on a Wednesday morning with a new LED fixture and a ladder and I installed it myself. It took 40 minutes. It has been on ever since. Some things you need to do yourself. I think about what it means to grow up in a place where the requests don't get answered. Where the light stays out for 11 months not because it's impossible to fix but because you're not important enough to fix it for. That particular experience does something to a person. I've spent a lot of time understanding what it did to me, and what it did to me, specifically, was make me precise. It made me careful with details. It made me unwilling to accept the logic that some things are just how they are. Things are how they are because someone decided they would be, and someone else could decide differently. I decided differently. My mother is in the kitchen right now. I can hear her through the open front door, the specific sound of her moving through a space she knows completely, the way she's always moved through spaces she inhabits fully and carefully. The kitchen window is closed against the morning cool. It closes correctly. The heat comes on when she sets the thermostat and it comes on quietly, without banging, without the radiator knocking like a tenant demanding attention that won't come. She gets her hair done on Saturday mornings at Delray Thread. She knows Destiny's name and Destiny knows hers. The block has that quality now, the quality of people knowing each other's names, of there being enough consistency and investment and intention that relationships form and hold. That's not something you can engineer directly. It's something that happens when the underlying conditions are right. Part of what I do, part of what building these properties the way I've built them is create conditions. I have 24 units on the block I came from. I have $5,400 per month in net cash flow and $378,000 in equity above my total investment and a total net worth of $2.4 million built from 15 years of not spending money I could save and not wasting time I could spend learning. I have a note card from Mr. Patterson in my jacket pocket. I have a mother in a kitchen with a window that closes right, drinking coffee in the apartment she raised me in the building that belongs to her son, on the block that belongs to us now. The anger that drove me out of here at 19, the specific anger of watching a hallway light stay dark for 11 months while my mother called an office and nobody came, that anger has mostly spent itself in the work. Not gone, exactly. More like converted. Transmuted into something that took its same intensity and put it toward something that lasts. 15 years of transmutation. That's the real asset on the balance sheet. Not the equity, not the cash flow, but the discipline of turning something hot and corrosive into something structural and lasting. I'm looking at a 6th building. 2 blocks over, corner lot, 10 units. Owner has been letting it drift for 3 years, and the drift is visible in the deferred maintenance and the below-market rents and the permit history that shows exactly what's been ignored and when. I've been watching it for 8 months. I have a file on my laptop. I know the numbers. I know what the renovation would cost and what the stabilized rents should be and what the cash flow looks like at 2 different leverage scenarios. I've run it enough times that it's starting to feel like a prayer. I'm from Delray Street. I know how to work. I know how to wait. I know what I'm building and why I'm building it, and I know that the why. My mother in the kitchen, the light on in the hallway, the window that closes right, Destiny's chairs full at 8:15 on a Saturday morning, is not separate from the what. The what is the block. The why is everyone on it. I'm still here. There's more work. There's always more work. I pick up my coffee. I look at Delray Street in the June morning light. I'm already looking at the next building. And